What would you do if your 9-year-old daughter ran to you one morning, crying, begging you to pretend you're dead? At first, it sounds insane, but for this father, that strange request would save his life. Sometimes the purest voice comes from the smallest heart. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The house by Lake Champlain had never felt emptier until a stranger's smile made Elias believe he could start over. Hazel Quinn had grown used to the soft silence of mornings. She was 9, but she moved through the kitchen like someone twice her age. She reached for the heavy skillet her mother once used, poured the batter she had mixed herself, and waited for the bubbles to rise. Outside the window, the lake shimmered beneath a faint fog. The smell of maple syrup drifted in from the open counter jar. 2 plates sat on the table, one for her father, one for the mother who wasn't coming back. Elias came downstairs slowly, as if each step reminded him of the weight he carried. "Morning, sweet pea," he murmured, forcing a smile. He looked thinner lately, Hazel noticed. He always did that smile to hide something. He sipped his coffee, then turned toward the window. Beyond the lake, the sun rose like a ghost behind the mist. That morning felt different. There was a flutter in the air, a car engine outside, a voice greeting the neighbor, then laughter that sounded too alive for this quiet house. Hazel peeked through the window. A woman was talking to Mrs. Baxter from the next cabin. Her hair caught the light, golden with the tone of autumn leaves, and her smile seemed to fill the air with warmth. "Who's that?" Hazel asked. Elias looked up, distracted. "Oh, new neighbor, I think. Just moved in last week." The next day, Hazel saw her again, this time at Maple Diner. She was sitting 2 tables away, chatting with the waitress about the blueberry pie. Her laugh was bright, confident, like someone who had seen the world and found it charming. Elias stopped by the counter to pay for takeout, and somehow the woman turned, smiled, and said, "You must be Elias Quinn. I've heard about you from Mrs. Baxter," she says. "You fix computers better than anyone in town." Elias chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess I'm guilty of that." "I'm Tessa," she said, extending her hand. "Tessa Vane. Just moved here from New York. Needed a little quiet, you know?" Something in the way she said quiet made Elias pause. He smiled, genuinely this time. "You came to the right place." Hazel watched them from the booth, chin resting on her hand, a small frown forming. There was something about Tessa's perfect lipstick and her easy charm that made Hazel uneasy. She didn't know why, only that it felt wrong to see her father laugh like that with someone who wasn't her mother. That evening, Elias returned home, humming an old tune Hazel hadn't heard in years. He set down a small paper bag on the counter. "She insisted you try the pie," he said, placing a slice before her. "Blueberry, your favorite." Hazel looked at it, then at him. "I thought Mom made the best one." Elias hesitated. "She did," he said softly. "But maybe it's okay to try another." Hazel didn't touch it. Days turned into weeks. Tessa began to appear more often, sometimes stopping by with homemade cookies, sometimes bringing a book for Elias. Her perfume lingered long after she left. The house started to smell less like sorrow and more like something Hazel couldn't name. One evening, she heard her father laugh from the living room, a laugh full and warm, the kind that used to belong to another life. But the warmth didn't reach Hazel. She stayed by the kitchen door, clutching her stuffed bear, watching Tessa pour wine for her father. Tessa looked up suddenly and caught Hazel's eyes. The woman's expression flickered just for a second, something sharp, calculating, before she smiled again. Later that night, Elias walked into Hazel's room. "You're quiet lately. Is everything okay?" Hazel nodded. "Just tired." He sat beside her bed, brushing her hair gently. "You'll like her, sweetheart. She's kind. Just give her a chance." Hazel wanted to tell him what she saw in that flicker of Tessa's eyes, but she didn't. She just turned away and whispered, "If you say so, Dad." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting the wooden floor gold. From outside came the sound of laughter again, Tessa's laughter. Hazel set down her fork, listening. Something inside her chest ached, but she didn't know what to call it yet. That weekend, the weather softened, the kind of late October warmth that made people linger outside just a little longer before winter came. Elias invited Tessa for lunch. Hazel watched from the porch as her father grilled by the lake, his sleeves rolled up, smoke curling through the cool air. He looked lighter, almost like the man he used to be. Tessa brought a bowl of coleslaw and a bright red scarf that matched the leaves. She moved through their home as if she had always belonged there, laughing easily, complimenting Hazel's drawings taped on the fridge. "You're talented," she said sweetly, kneeling beside her. "Your dad's lucky to have such a creative daughter." Hazel nodded politely. The compliment didn't reach her heart. Later, while Elias stepped inside to grab drinks, Tessa's voice changed low and quick. "You should smile more, Hazel. It makes your dad happy when you do." Hazel blinked. "I do smile." "Well," Tessa said, straightening, "maybe smile at the right time." Her eyes, for a brief second, hardened like glass. Then Elias returned, and the warmth returned with him. Dinner felt longer than usual. Hazel stayed quiet, pushing food around her plate while her father and Tessa talked about plans for the upcoming Maple Hollow Harvest Fair. Tessa offered to bake pies for the church event. Elias looked at her like she had just hung the moon. Hazel only stared at the candle between them, the wax melting into slow, uneven shapes. After Tessa left, Elias stood by the sink, whistling softly. "She's something, isn't she?" he said. Hazel tilted her head. "Yeah, she's something." When he turned away, her small hands clenched beneath the table. The next morning, mist covered the lake again. Hazel sat on the steps, watching her reflection ripple with each gust of wind. Mrs. Baxter walked by, holding her dog's leash. "Your daddy's new friend seems lovely," she said with a cheerful smile. Hazel forced a polite nod, but her stomach twisted. She didn't know why she wanted to cry. At breakfast, Elias looked at his phone, grinning. "Tessa wants to show us her new place later. She said she's making apple turnovers. You love those, don't you?" Hazel didn't answer. She just looked at her plate, at the untouched toast, and said quietly, "I miss Mom's pancakes." "Em?" Elias's hand froze around his mug. For a moment, the house felt completely still. Then he sighed. "Hazel, sweetheart, I miss her too. But we can't stay stuck in that sadness forever." "I'm not sad," Hazel said. Her voice was small, steady. "I just don't like pretending everything's fine when it's not." Elias opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. He looked at her mother's eyes staring back at him, and something inside him ached. That night, as he tucked her into bed, he said softly, "You'll understand one day, honey. When you're older, you'll see that people deserve second chances." When he left, Hazel stared at the window where the lake glimmered faintly in the dark. Her mother's photograph sat on the nightstand, framed in oak. She reached out and touched the glass. "He's smiling again, Mom," she whispered. "But not because of us." A single tear slid down her cheek, landing on the edge of the frame. Outside, the wind brushed against the cabin walls, carrying the faint echo of laughter from the neighboring house, the laughter of the woman who had begun to change everything. The pancakes tasted sweeter lately. Hazel couldn't tell if it was the extra syrup Tessa always brought over or the way her father smiled whenever Tessa entered the room. Autumn had deepened in Maple Hollow. Leaves blanketed the streets, soft as whispers underfoot. After school, Hazel walked past the Maple Diner where her father and Tessa often sat in the corner booth. She saw them through the glass, Elias laughing, Tessa touching his hand. The golden afternoon light caught in Tessa's hair, and Hazel felt that same uneasy pinch in her chest. Inside the diner, the waitress, a kind woman named June, noticed Hazel outside and waved. "Hey, sugar, want a slice of pie today?" she called out through the open door. Hazel shook her head politely. "No thank you, ma'am." She walked home, alone. The road wound past the church, the school, and finally the lake that always smelled faintly of pine and smoke. When she opened the door, the sound of music greeted her, something soft and jazzy, playing from her father's old speaker. Tessa stood by the counter, arranging flowers in a vase. "Oh, there you are," Tessa said without turning around. "Your dad's picking up dinner. Why don't you wash up?" Hazel hesitated in the doorway. "I already did." Tessa turned then, smiling, but her eyes were cool. "Then maybe you can find something useful to do instead of staring. Your dad's been stressed lately. Let's not make it harder, okay?" Hazel's throat tightened. She nodded and went upstairs. In her room, she sat by the window, knees pulled to her chest. The sound of car tires on gravel signaled her father's return. She watched him carry bags from the diner, watched Tessa greet him with a kiss on the cheek. Later that night, Elias knocked on her door. "Hazel, sweetheart," he said gently. "I noticed you've been quiet again. Did something happen?" She shook her head, avoiding his gaze. He smiled, kneeling beside her. "Tessa's trying, you know. She really wants you to like her." Hazel's voice came out small. "I'm trying too." Elias kissed the top of her head. "That's my girl." When he left, she whispered into the quiet, "But she's not trying with me." End of 2. The next afternoon, Elias had to drive to Burlington for work. Tessa stayed behind with Hazel. She baked cookies, chocolate chip, the smell filling the whole kitchen. "Come on," Tessa said, holding out a spoon of dough. "You like these, don't you?" Hazel took it slowly, tasting. It was good, too good. She smiled despite herself. Tessa noticed. "See? We could get along if you stopped looking at me like I stole something." Hazel blinked. "I never said you did." Tessa leaned closer, voice low. "You didn't have to." Then she straightened, laughing softly. "Relax, kid. I'm joking." That night, Hazel couldn't sleep. She heard Tessa on the phone downstairs, her voice barely above a whisper. Hazel crept to the top of the stairs, heart thudding. "Yes, baby," Tessa said, her tone sweet but strange. "Everything's fine. He's completely clueless." A man's muffled voice replied. Hazel couldn't make out the words, only the low chuckle. Tessa laughed lightly. "Soon, I promise. Once everything's signed, we can start fresh." Hazel's breath caught. Signed? What did that mean? Tessa hung up soon after and turned toward the stairs. Hazel darted back to her room, pretending to be asleep. The door creaked open slightly, a sliver of light cutting through the darkness. Hazel kept her eyes shut tight, breathing slow. Then the light vanished, and the door clicked shut. Hazel lay awake for hours, listening to the wind tapping against her window. She thought of her father's smile, the way Tessa had touched his hand at the diner, and for the first time, she felt something heavy bloom inside her, a fear that she couldn't name. Downstairs, the faint sound of the refrigerator hummed, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere beyond that hum, the phone lit up again, and Tessa's soft laughter returned. The next morning, the house smelled like cinnamon and sugar. Tessa was already in the kitchen, humming an upbeat tune Hazel didn't recognize. The sunlight caught her earrings, scattering light across the counter like little sparks. "Morning, sleepyhead," Tessa said brightly. "Your dad's on an early call. Thought I'd make us something special." Hazel rubbed her eyes, mumbling. "You don't have to." "Oh, I insist." Tessa turned toward her, smiling too wide. "You're family now, after all." Hazel sat at the table, watching her move around the kitchen as if it already belonged to her. The smell of baked sugar filled the air. Everything looked perfect, but the warmth didn't feel real. They ate in silence. Tessa sipped her coffee, her nails clinking against the mug. Hazel pushed the food around her plate, then looked up. "You were on the phone last night," she said softly. "Who were you talking to?" Tessa froze, just for a moment, before laughing it off. "Oh, that? A friend from New York. You know how girlfriends talk." Hazel nodded, but her stomach twisted. "You said something about signing." The smile vanished. Tessa's tone dropped an octave. "You listen too much, Hazel." Then, just as quickly, the sweetness returned. "Run along, kiddo. Go draw something by the lake, It's a beautiful day." Hazel stood slowly, her small hands trembling as she carried her plate to the sink. That evening, Elias came home with flowers, Tessa's favorite lilies. He looked happier than Hazel had seen him in years. "Guess what?" he said, setting the bouquet on the counter. "Tessa's been helping me organize the paperwork. You know, grown-up stuff. Insurance, bills, I'm useless with it." Hazel froze mid-step. "Insurance?" "Yeah," Elias said, smiling. "She's got a good head for that kind of thing." Tessa blushed modestly. "Just keeping him organized, that's all." Hazel swallowed hard. The pieces began to click together in her mind, though she didn't yet understand what picture they formed. After dinner, she went outside to the porch. The lake stretched out in front of her, dark and quiet. She could hear faint laughter from inside, the same laughter that made her father smile. Hazel hugged her knees and whispered to herself, "Something's wrong. I can feel it." Later that night, she tiptoed down the hallway again, through the crack in her father's office door, She saw Tessa standing over his desk. The desk lamp glowed soft gold, illuminating the papers spread out before her. Hazel squinted, trying to read. 2 words stood out. Life insurance. Tessa whispered into her phone again. "It's almost done, baby. The form's in front of him. He'll sign tomorrow." Hazel's hand flew to her mouth. Baby. She didn't sleep that night. When morning came, her eyes were red, her heart pounding. At breakfast, Elias was humming, papers folded neatly beside his coffee mug. "Tessa says this'll make things easier if anything ever happens to me," he said with a grin. Hazel's voice trembled. "Please don't sign it. Elias frowned. "Hazel, that's not your business. It's just paperwork." "But, sweetheart," he interrupted gently, "I know you're still getting used to all this, but Tessa's been wonderful to us. Don't make her feel unwelcome, okay?" Hazel's lip quivered. "I'm just trying to help." Elias sighed and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "I know, kiddo, but you've got to let me be the grown-up here." She looked down at her plate, blinking back tears. The maple syrup pooled around her pancakes, sticky and golden, too sweet. That afternoon, while Elias worked in the garage, Hazel sat by the window upstairs sketching. She drew her father's truck, then erased the wheels, then drew them again. Something about the image unsettled her. She didn't know why, but her stomach knotted with the same strange dread she had felt the night before. Outside, she heard Tessa's voice, soft but sharp, coming from the yard. Hazel leaned forward, pressing her ear to the open window. "Once it's done, we're set," Tessa whispered. "I'll handle the rest. He trusts me completely." The voice on the other end of the call replied with a low chuckle. Hazel's breath hitched. Her hand trembled so hard the pencil rolled from her lap to the floor. She backed away from the window, heart pounding, then turned and ran to her father's office. The papers were still there, the life insurance form, half filled. Tessa's handwriting in the margin, neat, looping. Too careful. Hazel clutched the edge of the desk, whispering, "Please, don't let him sign." The sound of footsteps in the hall made her freeze. "Hazel?" Tessa's voice was soft, almost sing-song. "Are you snooping, dear?" Hazel turned, her face pale. Tessa stood in the doorway, smiling calm, composed, terrifyingly sweet. "Curiosity's dangerous, you know. It ruins surprises." Hazel didn't move. Tessa took one step closer, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. "Go upstairs now. Your dad will be home soon, and we wouldn't want to worry him, would we?" Hazel turned and ran, her small feet thudding up the steps, her chest tight with fear. In her room, she locked the door, pressed her back against it, and whispered to herself, "I have to tell Dad. He has to believe me." Outside, the sun dipped below the trees. The house grew quiet except for the faint creak of the wooden beams and the steady sound of the wind. In the distance, the faintest echo of laughter drifted through the dark, the kind that sounded beautiful if you didn't know what hid beneath it. Hazel still remembered the words she'd overheard. "Once it's signed, we're set." Those words echoed in her head long after the laughter faded downstairs. That night, rain began to fall across Maple Hollow, soft and steady, like a secret being whispered to the earth. Elias was still in the garage, tinkering with his old truck. Upstairs, Hazel sat by the window, hugging her bear to her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. When she crept down the stairs for a glass of water, the house was dim, lit only by the golden glow of a lamp in the living room. Tessa was on the couch, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and sharp. Hazel froze at the corner of the hallway, holding her breath. "Yes, baby, I told you," Tessa murmured, her tone dripping with sweetness. "Everything's done. He's got no clue." A pause. Then, laughter quiet, chilling. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "He takes Route 100 like always. You cut the brakes, right? Good. No one will ever suspect a thing." Hazel's heart stopped. Her fingers tightened on the wooden banister. Tessa's voice softened again. "We'll have everything. The house, the money. 3 million, remember?" Hazel's knees went weak. She stumbled backward, a small squeak escaping her throat. The sound was almost nothing, but Tessa's head jerked toward the doorway. Hazel ducked behind the wall, pressing a hand over her mouth, forcing herself to breathe quietly. The creak of the couch. Footsteps. Tessa stepped into the hallway, eyes scanning the shadows. "Is someone there?" Hazel didn't move. Her heart thudded so hard she thought it might give her away. After a long silence, Tessa sighed. "Probably that stupid floorboard." she muttered, and went upstairs, her heels clicking lightly against the wood. Hazel waited until she heard the bedroom door close before she dared to move. She ran back to her room, tears spilling down her cheeks. She didn't sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to the rain, whispering to herself, "She's going to hurt him. She's really going to hurt him." Ugh. At dawn, when Elias came in smelling of rain and motor oil, Hazel ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Whoa, what's this?" he said, startled. "Bad dream?" "Dad," Hazel gasped. "Please don't drive today." He frowned, brushing the wet strands of hair from her face. "Why not?" "Because," she hesitated, breath trembling, "because she's going to do something bad. I heard her last night. She said you'd be on Route 100 and... Elias sighed, kneeling down so their eyes met. "Hazel," he said gently, "we've talked about this, haven't we? You can't let your imagination run wild. Tess has been nothing but kind." Hazel shook her head furiously. "You don't understand. She said, 'Cut the brakes. I swear.'" He blinked, taken aback by the desperation in her voice. Then his expression softened into pity. "Sweetheart, sometimes we hear things that aren't what they seem. Maybe you heard wrong. Maybe it was something on the radio." Hazel's tears came hot and fast. "You never believe me," she cried. Elias pulled her close, stroking her hair. "Of course I believe you, honey. I just don't believe that." When he left for work later that morning, Hazel stood on the porch in her raincoat, clutching her bear. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low over the lake, heavy and gray. She watched his truck roll down the driveway, the taillights glowing red in the mist. She wanted to scream, to run after him, to stop him, but all she could do was whisper, "Please come back." Hours passed like a blur. Hazel sat by the window, counting the seconds, watching every car that passed on the wet road. Then, in the early afternoon, the phone rang. She jumped. Tessa answered it quickly, voice soft. "Yes?" A man's voice murmured something Hazel couldn't hear. Tessa laughed high, nervous. "Don't be ridiculous. If something happened, I'd have heard by now." Hazel's stomach twisted. She pressed her ear to the doorframe, straining to hear. Then Tessa froze. "What?" she said sharply. "A car on Route 100? Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, it can't be him." The phone dropped to the floor. Tessa's knees buckled as she began to sob loudly, almost theatrically. Hazel's heart seized in her chest. For one terrible moment, she thought the worst had come true. Tessa's cries filled the house, sharp and sudden, echoing down the hallway. She collapsed onto the couch, one hand clutching her chest. "Oh God, Elias," she sobbed. "It can't be him. Not my Elias." Hazel stood frozen in the doorway, her tiny hands trembling. She wanted to run to her father, but she didn't know where. The room seemed to spin. Tessa looked up, her eyes glistening with perfectly timed tears. "Hazel," she gasped. I think there's been an accident. Your father's car..." They said it went off. Route 100. Hazel's world cracked open. Her breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered. "You're lying." Tessa reached for her, voice breaking in practiced grief. "Oh, honey, I wish I were." But Hazel pulled away. "You did this." The woman froze. For the briefest second, the sweetness in her face vanished, replaced by something sharp, hollow, and cold. Then she blinked, and the mask slipped back into place. "That's an awful thing to say," she murmured. "I know you're upset, but we have to stay calm. The police will be calling soon." Hazel ran upstairs and locked her door. Her chest heaved, her eyes wild. The sound of Tessa's false sobs below only made the silence in her room heavier. She climbed into bed, clutching her bear. Then she prayed. Not the kind of prayer you say at church, but the kind whispered into the dark when you don't know who's listening. "Please," she whispered, "don't let him be gone. Please, let him come back." The day blurred into gray. Rain began again, tapping softly on the glass. Hazel must have drifted into sleep at some point, because when she opened her eyes, the world had changed. She was standing by the lake, barefoot, the water still and silver beneath the moonlight. The mist curled like breath around her, and from the edge of the dock came a voice soft, familiar, and filled with love. Hazel, her mother, stood there, dressed in the same blue sweater she used to wear. She smiled, but her eyes were sad. "You have to be brave, sweetheart. He needs you now more than ever." Hazel took a step forward. "Mom, he's gone." Her mother shook her head gently. "Not yet. Tell him what you saw. Make him believe. And before you do, tell him to check the car. Do you understand?" Hazel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He won't believe me. He never does." "He will," her mother said softly. "This time he will." Then the wind changed, carrying the scent of rain and pine. The mist thickened, and her mother's figure began to fade. "Go, Hazel. Don't be afraid." Hazel reached out, but her hand met only air. The lake rippled, and she woke with a start. Morning light poured through the curtains, pale and cold. She sat up, heart racing. The dream clung to her like mist. Her mother's voice echoed in her ears. "Check the car." She threw on her sweater and ran downstairs. Tessa was gone. Probably out talking to the police or neighbors. Hazel burst through the back door and sprinted toward the garage. Elias's truck sat where it always did, droplets of rain glinting on the hood. Hazel climbed up onto the step, her fingers trembling as she reached for the handle. She didn't know what she was looking for, but something inside her told her it was real. She slid down, crouched near the front tire, and peered underneath. The smell of oil and metal filled her nose. Her hand brushed against something sharp, something that looked wrong, a cut in the line, thin but deliberate. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the whole world could hear it. She stumbled back, shaking, staring at the car as if it might suddenly come alive. Then she ran to the house phone, dialing with trembling fingers. When Tessa answered, her voice was calm again, smooth as silk. "Hazel, where are you? The sheriff's on his way." Hazel slammed the phone down. She didn't want to hear another word. She needed to think. She needed someone who would believe her. And then, as if her mother's voice whispered it, a name came to her, Uncle Owen. Detective Owen Reddick had been her father's old friend, someone Hazel had met once at a picnic years ago. He was quiet but kind, the kind of man who looked you in the eye when you spoke. She picked up the phone again, her small fingers dialing slowly, carefully. The line clicked, and a deep voice answered. "Reddick?" Hazel swallowed. "It's Hazel Quinn," she whispered. "Something bad's happening. You have to help my dad." There was a pause. "Hazel? Where's your father?" Her voice shook. He's supposed to be dead, but he's not. Not yet. Please, you have to make him believe me." Outside, thunder rumbled over the lake. Hazel pressed the phone tighter to her ear, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. And somewhere far away, on a road slick with rain, Elias Quinn's truck rolled through the mist, its brakes intact, its driver unaware that the truth was about to change everything. Detective Owen Reddick hadn't heard that name in years, Hazel Quinn. When the little voice came through the receiver that morning, shaky and scared, something inside him stirred. He was sitting at his kitchen table, the morning paper spread out beside a cup of black coffee. Outside, the hills of Vermont were wrapped in a thin mist. "Hazel?" he repeated gently. "You said your dad's supposed to be dead?" "Yes," the girl whispered. "But he's not. Please, you have to tell him to check the brakes. Tessa's trying to hurt him." Owen leaned back, frowning. He knew Elias Quinn well, a good man, if not a cautious one. "Where are you calling from, sweetheart?" "Home," she said. "Maple Hollow, the lake house, M." He scribbled a note, his hand steady, though his mind was racing. "All right, you stay put, okay? Don't talk to anyone until I get there." The line went quiet. Then Hazel said softly, "She's coming back soon. Please hurry." Owen hung up and grabbed his keys. The rain had eased, leaving the world smelling of wet pine and earth. He climbed into his old Ford and started the engine, the wipers squeaking against the windshield. Back at the lake house, Hazel sat by the window again, watching ripples dance across the gray water. She could still hear her mother's voice from the dream. Tell him to check the car. Tessa returned not long after, her face pale, mascara smudged. "They're sending people to look for him," she announced shakily, setting her purse down. "We just have to wait for news." Hazel didn't answer. Tessa poured herself a glass of wine, her hands trembling just enough to look convincing. "You know," she said softly, "when bad things happen, people say cruel things they don't mean. I'm sure you didn't mean what you said earlier." Hazel's eyes stayed on the window. "No," she murmured. "I meant it." The woman's smile flickered. "You're tired, Hazel. Go upstairs. I'll handle everything from here." Hazel rose, but instead of heading for the stairs, she turned toward the back door. "I'm going to the lake," Tessa's voice snapped. "Now's not the time for that. Hazel met her gaze small, steady, unblinking. Mom used to say the lake listens better than people. For a second, Tessa's face hardened, but then she forced another smile. "Fine, don't go far." Hazel walked out into the cool afternoon air. The lake shimmered under a pale sky, the kind that made everything look washed and quiet. She knelt at the edge, dipping her fingers into the water. The surface felt colder than it should have. A faint breeze carried the sound of a car in the distance. Hazel turned her head just as a dark pickup truck appeared down the dirt road. She stood up quickly. The truck stopped in front of the house, and out stepped a tall man with a graying beard, his coat damp from the drive. Hazel's heart leapt. "Detective Reddick?" she called out. He nodded. "That's right. You must be Hazel." She ran to him, relief and fear tangled in her eyes. "You came." He crouched down to meet her gaze. "I sure did. Now, tell me everything, from the start." Inside the house, Tessa watched through the curtain, her lips pressed into a thin line. Hazel told Owen everything about the phone calls, the cut brake line, the life insurance papers. Her small voice wavered, but never broke. When she finished, Owen stood silent for a moment, looking toward the garage. "You said you saw the line cut." Hazel nodded. "Right under the front. It was almost broken." "All right," he said. "We'll take a look, but I need you to stay close to me. Understand?" As they walked toward the garage, Hazel clutched his sleeve. "What if she sees us?" "Then we'll smile," Owen said quietly, "and pretend we're talking about fishing." They reached the truck. Owen knelt, running his flashlight beneath the chassis. His jaw tightened. "You've got good eyes, kiddo," he murmured. The brake line was sliced clean through a deliberate cut. When he straightened, Tessa was already standing in the doorway, arms folded, a tight smile on her face. "What are you doing in my garage?" she asked smoothly. Owen turned calm as ever. "Just admiring the craftsmanship. Elias always took good care of his truck." Her eyes flicked to Hazel, then back to him. "He did," she said sweetly. "Until the accident." "Funny thing about accidents," Owen replied softly. "They don't always happen by accident." Tessa's smile faltered. For a long moment, the air between them was still the sound of the lake, the creak of the wind through the pines, the faint drip of rain from the eaves. Then, from down the road, came the distant wail of sirens. The sound of sirens grew closer, their echo rolling over the quiet lake like a warning. Tessa's eyes flickered, the mask of calm slipping for just a moment. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Who called the police?" Owen didn't blink. "Protocol," he said easily. "Whenever there's a car accident, someone's bound to check the vehicles involved, you understand?" Her gaze darted between him and Hazel. For a heartbeat, she looked almost trapped, but then she smiled again, that same brittle, perfect smile. "Of course, anything to help." Hazel stood behind Owen, clutching her small hands together, her heart hammering. When the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, the air felt heavier. Deputy Lane, a broad man with kind eyes, stepped out, tipping his hat. "Detective Reddick?" "We got your message." Owen nodded. "Appreciate you coming fast." He led Lane toward the truck, lowering his voice. "The brake line's been cut. I've got a child saying there was talk of life insurance and an affair. The husband's supposedly dead, but I'm not buying it yet." Lane whistled softly.
"You think she staged it?"
"Let's just say," Owen murmured, "I've seen this pattern before." Behind them, Tessa's voice rose in a perfect blend of outrage and grief. "How dare you? I've just lost my husband, and now you're accusing me of something criminal?" Her words trembled, but her eyes didn't. Owen turned, his voice gentle but firm. "No one's accusing anyone. We're just trying to understand what happened, ma'am." Hazel stepped forward before he could stop her. "She did it," the girl said, her voice shaking but clear. "She talked to someone on the phone. She said you cut the brakes." "I heard her." Tessa froze. For a moment, There was only the sound of the lake and the sighing wind. Then she laughed softly, too softly. Poor thing. She's confused, traumatized. Elias's death must have been too much for her. Owen's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. He turned to the deputy. Lane, bag the vehicle and get it to the station. Full mechanical analysis. Hazel felt a strange rush of hope. Maybe, finally, someone believed her. As the officers worked, Owen guided Hazel to the porch. You did good, kiddo, he said quietly. Real good. But we're not done yet. Your father might still be out there. Her eyes widened. You mean alive? He nodded slowly. If he had sense enough to see that line cut before it gave out, maybe he faked the crash. If that's true, we'll find him. Tessa overheard the words. Her composure cracked. You can't just, he's dead, she shouted. I saw the pictures. Owen looked at her, calm as rain. Funny thing about pictures, they don't always tell the whole story. That was when her phone buzzed. She fumbled to silence it, but Owen's hand was faster. He took it gently from her grasp. May I? She glared at him, silent. Owen glanced at the screen, a single message from a number marked M. It read, Everything ready for tonight? He slipped the phone into his coat pocket. I think we'll keep this for evidence. Tessa's face drained of color. You can't... Ma'am, Lane interrupted, stepping forward. We're going to need you to come with us to answer a few questions. Tessa's jaw clenched. She straightened her shoulders, gathering her purse with shaking hands. Fine. But when this is over, you'll all be sorry. She turned on her heel, her voice trembling with false dignity. Come, Hazel. You shouldn't be here for this circus. Hazel didn't move. I'll stay with Detective Reddick. For the first time, Tessa's eyes betrayed real panic. Her lips parted as if to protest, but she said nothing. She walked toward the waiting cruiser, head high, but her steps uneven. When the door slammed behind her, Owen let out a slow breath. The lake shimmered beyond the trees, the light breaking through the clouds for the first time that day. Hazel stared at the reflection dancing on the water. She looked scared, she said quietly. Owen nodded. People usually are when the truth starts catching up. He looked down the road where the police car had vanished. Now, let's find your dad, kiddo. Hazel turned toward him, her small face lit by cautious hope. You really think he's alive? Owen smiled faintly. If I know Elias Quinn, he's too stubborn to go down that easy. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of rain and smoke. The storm had passed, but something in the air still felt unfinished, like a question waiting for its answer. As they stood there in the fading light, Hazel looked once more at the lake. The ripples spread slowly outward, as if someone beneath the surface had just whispered back. The morning after the storm, the mist over Maple Hollow hung low and pale, curling between the pine trees like breath on cold glass. Detective Owen Reddick's truck rolled down a narrow road leading to a ravine, the same road where they said Elias Quinn had died. Hazel sat in the passenger seat, her small hands folded tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken much since dawn. The radio hummed softly with old country tunes, filling the silence with the scratch of a fiddle and the warmth of a human voice. Owen turned the volume down. You sure you're ready for this, kiddo? Hazel nodded. Mom said to be brave. He smiled faintly. Smart woman. The road curved sharply, revealing the spot where a guardrail had been torn away. The metal glistened where it had bent and twisted the scene of the supposed accident. Owen stopped the truck and stepped out. The air smelled of wet earth and gasoline. He crouched near the edge, scanning the marks on the road. The report said the vehicle went over right here, he murmured. But look, no burn marks, no oil spill, no real impact trail. Someone wanted us to think a crash happened. Hazel stepped closer, her boots crunching the gravel. So he might have jumped out? Owen nodded. Could be, or staged the whole thing before anyone arrived. They followed the slope down carefully, the trees thick and dripping. About 20 feet below, part of the truck's bumper gleamed through the brush. But something about it was wrong, too clean, too deliberate. Owen brushed mud from the metal, revealing scorch marks that didn't match the story. This was burned after it was planted here, he said quietly. And not by an explosion, by a torch. Hazel's eyes widened. You mean he really did it? He pretended to die? Owen smiled. Looks that way. They searched further down the ravine. Beneath a sheet of tarp and a pile of leaves lay a trail of footprints, small and deep, leading toward the woods. Owen straightened and motioned Hazel to stay behind. "Wait here, kiddo." He followed the prints down the narrow path until he saw it. A small shack tucked behind the trees, smoke curling from a tin chimney. When he knocked, there was no answer. But a voice low and familiar came from inside. "You're not supposed to be here, Owen." Owen froze. Then, slowly, the door opened. Elias Quinn stood in the doorway, alive. His beard was rough, his face drawn, his clothes streaked with soot and mud. But his eyes, they were sharp and full of life. "I figured it out just in time," Elias said quietly. "The line was cut. I fixed it. But I knew if I went home, she'd know I knew. So I made it look real." Owen exhaled, relief softening his face. "You scared half the town, old friend." Elias gave a tired smile. "Had to make sure she'd hang herself with her own lies." He looked past Owen toward the road above. "Where's Hazel?" "She's up the hill. Been waiting for you." For the first time, Elias's composure broke. His voice wavered. "She believed in me, didn't she? She always did." Owen nodded. "She's the reason you're standing here free instead of 6 feet under." Elias's eyes glistened. He wiped at them roughly. "I owe that little girl everything." Then his voice hardened. "It's time we finish this." Owen put a hand on his shoulder. "You'll have your chance, but we do it by the book. No surprise." Elias looked back toward the shack. A bed, a radio, a half-empty can of beans. "I've been living like a ghost for a week. I'm ready to come home." They climbed the hill together. When Hazel saw her father appear through the mist, she froze, then ran with everything she had. "Daddy." Elias caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground as she cried into his shoulder. For the first time in days, she laughed a small, shaking sound that broke the silence. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you she was lying." He pressed his cheek against her hair. "You did, sweetheart, and I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner." Behind them, the lake gleamed through the trees. The sun broke through the clouds at last, washing the world in gold. But the peace was short-lived. Owen's radio crackled. A voice came through, urgent, static-filled. "Detective Reddick, this is Deputy Lane. We've got a problem. The woman you brought in, she's gone." "So?" Owen's smile faded. Hazel looked up at him, eyes wide. "What does that mean?" He hesitated, his expression grave. "It means the storm's not over yet." For a long moment, none of them moved. The sound of the deputy's voice still crackled faintly through the radio, followed by the hiss of static. "Repeat that," Owen said. "She's gone." The deputy's voice came again. "We had her in holding, calm as could be. Then she said she needed water. 5 minutes later, she was just gone. Disappeared before shift change. Security camera caught her leaving with a coat and a cap borrowed from evidence." Owen closed his eyes, the lines around his mouth tightening. "Copy that. Lock down every exit between Maple Hollow and Burlington. She's not getting far." He clipped the radio to his belt and turned to Elias. "You just bought yourself another storm, my friend." Elias's arm tightened around Hazel, who clung to his coat, eyes wide. "She'll come back, won't she?" Hazel whispered. He looked down at her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Not if I can help it." Owen's truck bounced along the muddy road back toward town, the silence heavy except for the soft hum of the engine. Hazel sat between them, holding her father's calloused hand. He kept glancing at her as if reassuring himself she was really there. "I should have seen it," he murmured. "The way she talked about the money, the paperwork. I just thought she was helping." You wanted to believe," Owen said quietly. "That's not a crime." Elias looked out the window, voice rough. "It almost cost me my daughter." Hazel leaned against him. "But you came back. You always come back." He smiled faintly. "Guess I'm too stubborn to quit." When they reached the lake house, the air felt strangely still, as if the world was holding its breath. The wind had died down, and the trees stood motionless, their reflections trembling on the water. Owen parked a short distance away. "Stay here," he told them, then walked ahead toward the porch. The front door stood open. He drew his flashlight and stepped inside. The living room was quiet, too quiet. A wine glass lay shattered on the floor, the scent of red wine mingling with something faintly chemical. "Elias," he called softly. "We've got company." Elias was already beside him, Hazel tucked safely behind. "She's been here, isn't?" A note lay on the counter, written in Tessa's delicate handwriting. "You ruined everything, Elias, but you can't hide forever. See you by the water." Owen's jaw tightened. "She's circling back to the lake." They ran outside. The air had turned colder, clouds gathering again over the horizon. Down by the water's edge, faint footprints marked the damp sandhills and small impressions leading toward the dock. Hazel clung to her father's arm. "Dad, don't go," she pleaded. He crouched to meet her eyes. "Hazel, listen to me. You stay with Detective Reddick, all right? No matter what happens." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You can't leave again." "I won't," he promised, his voice steady. "Not this time." He stood and walked down the path toward the dock. Owen followed, his hand on the holster under his coat. The fog rolled in thick and silver over the lake. At the end of the dock stood a figure still, waiting. "Tessa," Elias called, his voice echoing across the water. "It's over." She turned slowly. The wind lifted her hair, her face pale against the mist. "You ruined it all, Elias," she said softly. "We could have had everything." "You almost had my life," he replied. Her smile was faint, broken. "You were supposed to die. You were supposed to stay gone." Elias took a step forward. "It's not too late to stop this." But she shook her head. "Oh, it's too late for me." "Huh?" Owen moved closer, voice calm. "Ma'am, put your hands where I can see them. Let's end this the right way." For a heartbeat, it seemed she might listen. Then she took one slow step backward toward the edge of the dock. "Tessa!" Elias shouted. Her eyes met as a strange, empty sadness there, and she whispered, "Tell her, I'm sorry." Then she turned and stepped back into the water. The lake swallowed the sound. Owen ran forward, but by the time he reached the edge, only ripples remained, spreading wider and wider into the mist. Elias fell to his knees, staring at the water. Hazel's cries echoed faintly from the shore, a small voice calling his name. Owen stood beside him, hand on his shoulder. "Come on," he said gently. "Let her go." Elias's voice broke. "She almost took everything from me, but I still can't." "I know," Owen said quietly. "Sometimes forgiveness is the only way we heal." The fog began to lift as they walked back toward the house. Hazel ran into her father's arms, and he held her close, his eyes wet but calm. Above them, the clouds parted just enough for a beam of light to touch the lake soft and silver, like grace returning to the world. Morning light spilled over the lake, calm and silver after the storm. Inside the little house, Elias and Detective Owen sat quietly at the kitchen table, steam rising from their coffee cups. Hazel came down, sleepy-eyed, and curled into her father's lap. "Is she gone?" she whispered. Elias nodded slowly. "They're still searching, but I think she's at peace now," Owen said gently. "Justice doesn't always come from handcuffs, Hazel. Sometimes it comes when the truth is finally seen." They ate breakfast in silence. The house smelled of maple and wood smoke. Then Deputy Lane arrived, holding a clear bag Tessa's phone, pulled from the lake. "Found it near the dock," he said. Owen turned the wet device in his hand. "If we can recover her calls, we'll know who helped her." Elias exhaled. "It's strange. Even now I can't hate her completely." Owen gave a quiet nod. "You don't have to. You just have to live." Hazel looked at her father. "Mom said the lake keeps us safe." He smiled, pulling her close.
She was right.
The sunlight poured in brighter through the window, warming the worn floorboards. Owen stood to leave. "You two take care of each other. You've both earned a little peace." Elias squeezed Hazel's hand. "We will." As the door closed behind the detective, the house felt lighter, as if the darkness that had lingered for weeks had finally gone out with the night. That afternoon, the air around Maple Hollow felt softer. The lake was calm again, its surface catching the light like glass. Hazel and her father stood by the water's edge, side by side, the silence between them peaceful instead of afraid. "She used to bring me here," Hazel said quietly. "Mom," We'd feed the ducks and throw little flowers in the water. Elias smiled faintly. She always said this lake was where truth floated, even when people tried to sink it. Hazel looked up at him. Do you think Mom saw everything that happened? He placed a hand on her shoulder. I think she never stopped watching. Behind them, Detective Owen approached, holding a folded report. Got the phone data back, he said. We traced her calls. The man she talked to, Mark Lane, was arrested this morning in Albany. He confessed to everything. Elias let out a long breath. So it's really over. Owen nodded. It's over. He turned to Hazel with a warm smile. You were the brave one, kiddo. Most adults wouldn't have done what you did. Hazel blushed and looked down at the lake. I just didn't want my dad to go away too. Owen touched his hat. Well, you saved him. That's something to be proud of. Then he walked back toward his truck, leaving father and daughter in the fading light. Elias knelt beside Hazel. I'll listen better from now on, he said softly. You taught me that. She hugged him, her voice muffled against his coat. Promise? Promise. They stayed there until the sun sank behind the hills, the sky painted in soft gold. The lake rippled gently, carrying away the last traces of fear, leaving only the quiet, steady sound of life beginning again. The storm was gone, but it left behind a silence so tender it almost hurt. Morning light spilled gently across Maple Hollow, washing the trees, the roofs, and the still lake in gold. The old fence creaked in the wind, and somewhere far away, a church bell rang, the kind of sound that made you stop and breathe. Elias Quinn had begun to move slower, not from age, but from awareness. Every motion seemed deliberate now. The way he brewed his morning coffee, the way he stood by the window to watch Hazel catch the school bus, the way his eyes softened when she waved goodbye. He'd thought peace would come loud and triumphant like sirens fading, or a gavel striking justice. But instead, it came quietly, with the hum of the refrigerator and the smell of cinnamon toast. Hazel had changed too. She still laughed, still drew pictures of the lake and their little house. But she no longer asked questions about Tessa or the woman in the water. Some truths were better left in the lake's reflection. That Saturday, the sky was wide and blue, and Elias decided to fix the old rocking chair on the porch. Hazel brought him a cup of cocoa, careful not to spill. You think it'll still rock? She asked, tilting her head. He chuckled softly. Only one way to find out. When he finally sat, the chair creaked but held. Hazel clapped her hands and beamed, her smile like sunlight breaking through clouds. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the sound of the wind and the lake filling the space between words. Dad? Hazel said finally, her voice small but steady. Are you mad at her? Elias stopped rocking. The question hung in the air, heavier than the quiet around them. He set his cup down, took a slow breath, and answered softly. I was, for a long time. But being angry, he looked toward the lake. It keeps you stuck where the pain is. I want to move forward now. For us. Hazel leaned against his arm. Mom would like that, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Yeah, I think she would. A gentle wind rippled through the pine trees, carrying the scent of rain and soil. From where they sat, the lake shimmered faintly, catching bits of sunlight like scattered glass. After a long moment, Hazel spoke again. I think Mom helped us. She was there when I dreamed. She told me to tell you. Elias didn't answer right away. His eyes glistened, but his voice stayed calm. I believe you, Hazel. I think she never left. Hazel nodded and took his hand. Then we're three again, right? He laughed softly, squeezing her fingers. Yeah, we're three again. A car passed by on the road, the mail truck. Life went on. Birds fluttered from branch to branch. Somewhere, a radio played a slow tune from the diner downtown, the kind of melody that made old men smile and women hum along while washing dishes. Elias rocked gently, the chair groaning in rhythm, his heart finally at peace with the noise of ordinary life. That evening, they ate dinner on the porch. Hazel insisted on saying grace, something she hadn't done since her mother passed. Her small voice trembled but carried strength. Thank you, she whispered, for bringing my dad back and for making us safe. Elias bowed his head, his throat tight. Amen, he said quietly. When night fell, they watched the fireflies gather near the lake. Their glow was faint but constant, small flickers of life that refused to disappear. Hazel leaned into him and murmured, "I think those are Mom's lights." He smiled, eyes soft in the dusk. "Then she's closer than I thought." And for the first time in a long while, the dark no longer frightened him. It just felt like home. Spring came early that year. The snow melted before March, leaving the lake wide and blue again. Elias and Hazel planted wildflowers along the fence line, the same way her mother used to. On Sundays, they'd walk into town for pancakes at Maple Diner. June, the waitress, always slipped Hazel an extra strawberry, saying, "For the bravest girl in Maple Hollow." Elias laughed more now. Sometimes he still woke at night, remembering the sound of water and the glow of fire. But when he looked across the hall and saw Hazel sleeping safely, peace returned. One evening, Owen stopped by. He looked tired but content. "The case is closed," he said. "Her partner took a deal. You two can finally breathe." Elias shook his hand. "We already have." After he left, Hazel brought out her sketchbook. She showed her father a drawing. The lake, calm and bright, with 3 figures standing at the dock. A man, a little girl, and a woman made of light. "Do you think Mom's proud of us?" Hazel asked. Elias studied the drawing, his throat tightening. "I know she is." They sat together in the fading light, listening to the crickets, the steady hum of evening settling over the water. The world had scars now, burned metal, old lies, memories of fear, but also something stronger, the quiet strength that comes from surviving. Hazel looked at the horizon and whispered, "We made it, Dad." He smiled, pulling her close. "Yeah, sweetheart, we did." The lake reflected the last gold of sunset, calm and endless like forgiveness itself. By late spring, Maple Hollow had turned tender again. The lake no longer whispered of storms, only peace. Wildflowers had begun to bloom along the old road, and the burned patch of earth where the truck once lay was now soft with grass. Hazel sat on the porch steps, her sketchbook on her knees. She was drawing the lake, the trees, the small house, everything that was still here. Her father sat nearby, fixing the last slat of the old fence, humming softly under his breath. "Looks different now," she said, shading a ripple in her drawing. Elias smiled. "Yeah, the world looks different when you stop looking at what you lost and start seeing what you still have." He set the hammer down and joined her. The evening air smelled of pine and damp soil. The sky glowed faintly pink, the kind of light her late mother had loved. Hazel pointed to the water. "Can we put the lantern out again tonight?" He nodded. "Of course. Your mom wouldn't miss it." They stood side by side on the dock as the sun slid behind the hills. Hazel struck a match, lighting the small paper lantern. Its glow danced across their faces before floating out over the lake, soft and gold against the darkening blue. Elias watched it drift away and whispered, "Thank you, Hazel." She looked up, smiling. "For what?" "For bringing the light back." The lantern drifted farther and farther into the stillness. Its golden glow reflected across the wide surface of the lake. Every ripple carried a piece of light outward, soft and slow, until the entire water seemed to shimmer not from fire, but from peace. Hazel stood beside her father on the dock, her small hand resting in his. The night air was cool, smelling faintly of pine and damp earth. The frogs had begun their evening chorus, and in the distance, an owl called once, low and steady. Elias took a deep breath. "You know," he said, his voice gentle and low, "the first night after your mom passed, I came out here too. I didn't say a word. I just stood here and asked the water why everything had to hurt so much." Hazel looked up at him, her face soft in the lantern's glow. "Did the lake answer?" He smiled, a faint, weary smile. "Not that night, but I think it's been answering ever since, through you." Hazel leaned against him, and for a while, neither of them spoke. The lake lapped softly at the wooden dock, as if listening. Elias turned his gaze toward the far side, where the trees met the stars. "I thought I knew what love was," he murmured. "Then I lost it, and I learned love isn't just about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go and trusting it'll find its way back." Hazel squeezed his hand. "Like the lantern?" He nodded. "Exactly like that." The glow drifted farther, smaller now, but still visible, a steady heartbeat against the darkness. "Dad," Hazel said after a pause, "do you think Mom can really see us?" Elias looked out across the water. I think she never stopped. She saw you when you were brave. She saw me when I finally opened my eyes. And tonight, I think she's smiling. Hazel's lips curved into a tiny smile. Then she's probably telling us to go inside before we catch a cold. He laughed quietly, a sound that carried warmth again, not sorrow. That sounds like her. They turned back toward the house together, walking slowly along the wooden planks of the dock. The porch light glowed softly, welcoming, like an old friend. Inside, the faint hum of the radio played one of Elias's favorite songs, something slow and full of memory. In the living room, Hazel's drawing still sat on the mantel. The lake, the dock, 3 figures standing together, a man, a little girl, and a woman drawn in soft light. The fire crackled gently below it, golden against the walls. Elias paused in front of the picture. You drew her beautifully, he said. Hazel tilted her head. She looks like light because she is. He brushed her hair back tenderly. You got her spirit just right, kiddo. They sat down together by the fire. Outside, the crickets sang, the lake shimmered, and the last trace of the lantern's glow disappeared beyond the horizon. After a long silence, Hazel spoke again, voice small but sure. We're really okay now, aren't we? Elias looked at her steady eyes, her brave little heart, and nodded. We are, sweetheart. We're home. He reached for the worn Bible on the side table, the one his late wife used to keep open by the bed. He turned to the last page and read aloud in a quiet voice. And there shall be light in the evening time. Hazel closed her eyes and smiled. I like that. He kissed her forehead. Me too. As the night deepened, a new moon rose above Maple Hollow, silver and serene. The house by the lake glowed softly, its windows warm, its silence kind. The world had changed, but in the gentle rhythm of water against wood, in the heartbeat of family rediscovered, there was something eternal. The lantern's light might have faded, but its reflection lingered in memory, in forgiveness, and in every quiet breath of love that refused to die. And so, the lake that had once held secrets now held something far greater. Peace. No storm lasts forever. Sometimes, the light that saves us doesn't come from the sky. It comes from the people who never stop believing in us. Sometimes, the quiet after a storm feels louder than thunder itself. When the lake grew still again, Elias and Hazel learned that peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small moments. A shared breakfast, a laugh over burnt pancakes, the creak of an old rocking chair that somehow still holds steady. In the soft rhythm of their new life, there were no grand gestures, no dramatic endings, just light, the kind that comes from forgiveness, from seeing one another clearly again. And maybe that's what love really is. Not a promise that nothing will hurt, but a decision to keep rebuilding even after everything has fallen apart. Elias once believed he had to protect Hazel from the world. But in the end, it was her courage, her pure, stubborn belief in goodness that saved him. And for Hazel, it was her father's steady presence that turned her fears into strength. Together, they proved that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to live fully again. As spring settled over Maple Hollow, the lake reflected not just their faces, but their journey from darkness to light, from loss to something like grace. The lantern they set afloat each night wasn't just for their mother. It was for everyone who's ever lost hope and still found their way home. Maybe you've known a storm of your own, the kind that changes what you believe about people, or even yourself. Maybe you've stood by a quiet window after everyone's gone to bed and wondered if peace would ever come back. If you have, remember this. It always does. Just not all at once. Sometimes it comes in the form of a small voice calling you home. Because love, real love, isn't loud. It's patient. It's the hand that reaches for yours when the world has gone quiet. True love and redemption begin in forgiveness. No matter what's been lost, kindness can rebuild what fear destroyed. Family isn't defined by perfection, but by the courage to stay and to listen. Happiness doesn't wait at the end of the road. It grows quietly in the moments we choose to care for one another. Like the warm porch light on a quiet American evening, a simple act of goodness can still guide us through life's darkest turns. So tonight, before you turn off the lights, Take a moment to think about who brings light into your life and how you might be that light for someone else. And if this story touched your heart, press 1" the comments below. If it didn't quite reach you, or you'd like to share your thoughts, press 0. Your voice matters here. If this story found a home in your heart, stay with us for more. Because somewhere out there, another light is waiting to be seen.